Good afternoon and welcome to the CNBC Africa special. We are coming to you live from a Constitutional Hill here in Johannesburg, South Africa. My name is Fifi Peters. So not only is this home to the Constitutional Court here in South Africa, which champions the rights of citizens in the country, but also a monumental site, the former women's prison, which incarcerated many women who fought actively against the colonial rule of the past and played an important role in attaining the freedoms that the country enjoys today. Keeping with the spirit of Women's Month here in South Africa, we thought to honor their place in history. But we are also here to write a new history of BRICS and Africa, which is the theme of the 15th BRICS summit that seeks to foster mutual partnerships for accelerated economic growth, sustainable development, as well as multilateralism. In the next hour, you'll be hearing from experts from business and government who'll be speaking to the dream of BRICS and Africa and how to make it a reality. We'll also be taking questions here from the floor, from our physical audience in the room who are joining us here at Constitutional Hill, but also we welcome any comments and questions from the virtual audience, of course, who are logged in on Hopin. We are looking forward to hearing from you. With that said, I would like to announce and welcome the very first speaker for today. It is the MEC for Economic Development in Gauteng, MEC Tasneem Motara, who will be giving us the official welcome. MEC, ma'am, it is over to you.
Thank you so much, Fifi, and a warm good afternoon to everybody, our guests here at Constitution Hill, as well as those who have logged on. I'm told there's a number of ambassadors that have logged on. I will not recognize all of you individually, but also ambassadors here in the room who have joined us. Thank you so much. Ambassador Nzapayeke, thank you so much, sir. And to the chairperson of BRICS Business Council here in South Africa, ma'am, thank you so much for your support, but also your responsibility and role in this process, which has been really an indelible mark for us as we present this summit this year. In building the Africa we want, the Gauteng City region, the industrial heartland of sub-Saharan Africa, the implementation of Agenda 2063 is expressed as the Growing Gauteng Together 2030 plan. In our provincial plan, we have outlined specific actions to expand intra-Africa commerce, which include the expanding subnational economic diplomacy and intensifying collaboration with various provinces and city regions on the continent, to formally showcase regional and continental partnerships and potential areas for collaboration based on our 10 high-growth sectors, to promote continental investment in Gauteng-based businesses to help grow trade links, and last, by signing twinning city agreements with other city regions across the continent to further leverage trade opportunities. The creation of the vast Africa Free Trade Area regional market is a major opportunity to help African countries diversify their exports, accelerate growth, and attract foreign direct investment. The Africa Free Trade Agreement has effectively created the largest free trade area in the world, measured by the number of countries participating. The pact connects 1.3 billion people across 55 countries with a combined gross domestic product valued at $3.4 trillion. It has the potential to lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty and 68 million Africans out of moderate poverty. All this will be implemented against a global economy in turmoil due to, as we know, the rising cost of living, the slow post-COVID pandemic recovery, shifting geopolitics, and the conflict in Eastern Europe. As such, achieving its full potential will depend on putting in place significant policy reforms and trade facilitation measures. As we all know, trade integration across Africa has long been limited by outdated infrastructure and differing regulations across zones of markets. Intra-African exports were 16.6% of total exports in 2022, compared to 68.1% in Europe, 59.4% in Asia, 55% in America, and 7% in Oceania. Although the BRICS bloc is Africa's largest trading power, trade integration with the BRICS region has also been limited to African countries exporting raw materials to the BRICS bloc countries. Constraints to Africa value-added trade is well documented, but we must recognize that the biggest gains would come from the reduction in non-tariff barriers. For example, Africa's infrastructure networks remain unsatisfactory, partially as a result of weak regulatory frameworks and lethargic investments that coexist with weak economic performance. There is a clear gap in quality infrastructure across Africa. However, it's essential to note that while these are not challenges, but substantial areas of opportunity, Africa's place in BRICS presents exciting areas of trade, investment, and collaboration between the world's largest free trade area and the world's largest economic bloc, to build stronger relationships which are mutually beneficial in driving economic progress, productivity, and sustainable economic growth for the world's emerging markets. As our South-to-South partnership grows from strength to strength, some of these developments include improvements in macroeconomic prudence and overall governance. In closing, it's important to note that the continent's industrialization and growth objectives will depend on fostering stronger South-to-South relations. Industrialization with the right partners will be a key driver of economic progress, productivity, and sustainable economic growth in the world's most resource-rich and most youthful continent. I look forward to hearing insights from our panelists on how they are leveraging relationships to mutually enhance our ambitions in significantly increasing human development in our continent. Asante sana.
And thank you to you, MEC. And so when South Africa took over chairmanship of BRICS, it vowed to advance African interests, essentially exercising its status as a gateway to the rest of the continent. So now our next speaker will give us an overview and a perspective of what that does look like, particularly from the perspective of the BRICS Business Council, which she chairs, the South Africa chapter. Can we welcome Ms. Busi Mabusa?
Thank you so much, Fifi. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. MEC, thank you for the generous and warm welcome to all of us, most especially for hosting us on these hallowed grounds as we meet with our business partners, policymakers, as well as diplomatic counterparts. I recognize the Dean of African Ambassadors who's joining us here in person today. And please let me acknowledge our colleagues at the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency, as well as CNBC Africa, who've been amazing friends and partners of the BRICS Business Council. And MEC, I know you had a lot to do with that. I'm filled today, ladies and gentlemen, with gratitude, pride, and a sense of optimism that the opening event, this opening event, is one devoted to our beautiful continent, Africa. It's particularly significant that we meet both virtually, but for those of us who could gather here in person, we are at a site of incarceration of our leaders and forebears, which today is a seat of the Supreme and Apex Court of this country. It's a place now of hope, it's a place of courage, and most importantly, it is a place of progress, which is what today's conversation is about. The journey towards our goal for that Africa that we want will need us to take bold and gallant steps. The BRICS partnership presents tremendous opportunities, no doubt, for African countries to grow and expand their markets, as well as attract foreign direct investment into the continent. The BRICS economies accounted for almost 30% of world GDP in 2022, as well as world trade. And this was a massive increase in terms of trade from a 7% share just in 2001. So in 20 years, that has been a significant uptick. Ladies and gentlemen, I extend the warmest and most sincere gratitude from the BRICS Business Council to all panelists, all speakers, as well as everybody that is joining us both from the virtual platform and here in person. This conversation must not end today, but this should be the beginning of a journey that we must all walk together. Thank you so much.
And we will now hear our keynote address that will be delivered by Ambassador Andre Nzapayeke. He is the Dean of African Ambassadors to South Africa, as well as the former Prime Minister of Central Africa Republic.
Good afternoon, everybody. Allow me to recognize the MSc is here, the chair, and all dignitaries who are here, my colleague, Ambassador of the Gambia, and thank all of the organizers of this great event at a very great moment, because since decades, I think Africa has not experienced something like what is going on, what will be going on this week, to engage with so many amazing countries like the BRICS countries. I'll be short. I've been asked to be short. As you all know, we are all, most African countries, we derive from, we are products of the colonial time. And even the way we are still today have been shaped by the colonial rules in those days. And since our independence, what we call independence, because yesterday I was congratulating a friend about the independence of his country, an African friend, and he told me, okay, come back to me when we really get the real independence. so I put it a bit in brackets. And since our independence in the 60s, you know, the way African countries has been doing business, operating, the Anglophones were dealing with the Anglophone masters. The Francophones were dealing also with the Francophone, the Lusophones. So we have been divided into cultures and languages and so on that do not belong to us. And this has put us a bit in a situation that we had to go into a kind of to forget what is forget multilateralism. Many of us forgot even that other part of the world exists. In my country, the Central African Republic, I think even you go to the remote village, people, they know Paris. They know where Paris is, but they don't know the name of the next city. You know, so. And sometimes some people, they have to travel to China. Necessarily, they have to go through Paris. That's how we have been brainwashed and also linked to our colonial masters. Unfortunately, the global market still, until today, in many cases, controlled by those powers I've been talking about. Even the prices of our product are still controlled also by the system that has been in place for decades now. The BRICS and the potential offers really, really new opportunities for Africa, and we should not miss this opportunity. I think after the independence years, and after, of course, the liberation of Southern Africa, I think this is one of the greatest things that is happening to us. And we should make sure that we realize that, and that there is we take it strongly and make sure that there is we make the shift that is expected now in our engagement with the BRICS. So the BRICS open really doors for us Africans. We have the possibility to correct what you have been doing wrong in the last 63 years and why we have not been able to build the Africa we want. This is now an opportunity for us to think differently and not to go tomorrow again, accuse the colonizers that they are the ones who are doing this, they are the ones who are doing that. We have today an opportunity to use the potential that is being offered by the BRICS. People always say, yeah, opportunities in Africa are huge. We have so many millions of hectares of arable land. We have huge potential, vast potential in natural resources. We have a vibrant youth, but we will not move further if really there is no paradigm shift. If we don't change radically the way we do business, if we continue behaving as we have behaved, we go to China just as you have been going to Paris, you have been going to Portugal, it will not change anything. We do not want to replace the West by the East without us being there, being treated as equals. And this idea of being treated as equals, that should be really one of the first things that we put in front of us, one of the first objectives. How are we gonna benefit from the BRICS? That is only if we are treated as equal, and that is only if we unite. It's only if we consider ourselves as the owners of the wealth that we have in Africa, as those who are there made to make the prices and to value also what we have on this continent. It means you have to improve our capacity. I was very happy to hear the president of Botswana, who was saying recently that they have changed they are gone into discussion with the beers to say now we have to change the way we do business. Before, you were the one selling diamond, dealing with diamond abroad for us. So our problem today is that we don't know anything about the market. No Botswana can go abroad and say, I'm coming to deal in diamond, because he doesn't know the network, how it works, and so on. So now, the beers, we want to train our own people to be able to handle, to do both, to process the diamond from extraction to selling it in Hong Kong or in Dubai. You are no more going to be the only one. And this capacity, we need ourselves to take it over. We need to train our people to be able to handle those issues. Because Chinese, okay, they are our friends, they are good, but they are business people. They are business people, they have their own country also to deal with. We cannot expect them to come and just do everything. Build road for us, we don't even know how road is built, and go away. Because I can tell you, I know that in South Africa, situation is a little bit different, but to be honest, in many countries, they give a tender to a Chinese company, the company arrives, built, give the key, said, okay, now we are finished, pay the balance, and we go. 6 months later, there are issues with this road. Nobody knows how to maintain the road. And that's like that with many, many, many infrastructures. Anyway, we really, as continent, we have huge possibility to offer. Imagine today how many kilometers of road do we need to build in Africa? Thousands of kilometers, thousands of bridges that we need to build, thousands of universities, schools, power plants, and so on. We have a huge potential like the Inga Dam in DRC. Today we have the MEC talked about the Africa Free Trade Agreement. This is something we have in hand. We cannot say that we don't know how to deal with the BRICS. We know because we have the Agenda 2063. We have it. We know where we're going to, and then we have the free trade, Africa Free Trade Zone. We know what we should put into it for it to be reality. With this, we can build also our Belt and Road. We have this huge opportunity to be almost at the center of the world. If I I'm here in South Africa, look upwards. On my right side, Asia is just across Sudan and Egypt. Look north, Europe is 14 kilometers from Africa, from the channels of Gibraltar. So we have really this capacity to do it, and I think that we cannot, after what's going to happen here, say again that no, we did not know, we didn't have the capacity, we have the time. I've attended many, many, many discussions here. The political parties were engaged, and so many civil society, and you are engaging, bringing this on the table. I think the possibility is really huge that we can do something with the BRICS. But as I said, we have to build our own capacity first. We have to start becoming Afrocentrist, because we look too much to others. If you want to deal today with BRICS, we have to reorganize Africa itself. You know, we have to be strong inside Africa. Our RECs, the regional economic communities, have to be strong. The global continent has to be strong. We need to develop common interests in Africa. Today, we waste so much time. There are tensions at the eastern border of DRC because some say, yeah, Rwanda is coming to plunder our minerals, and why can't we do this together? I see here that South Africa, Lesotho, Botswana, they are managing water reserves in Lesotho together. There are also some programs here, like with Mozambique, to do things together. This is the way we should go. That's really the way we should go, that within Africa, we have to organize ourselves, reorganize our economy, reorganize our governance. That is extremely important. When people talk about corruption, this is not a joke. This is something absolutely important if we really want to be taken seriously by our BRIC partners, who are very, very serious people.
Some also say that corruption is also a tax, an added layer, an added cost of doing business. So, but if you would kindly allow me to take back the mic and kindly allow us to have a brief panel discussion. And then, so if time does permit, we hope that we'll be able to readdress all the issues in which you have shared and still have to share. Thank you, sir.
In short, I should interrupt now and wait. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And as the ambassador said, this is an exciting time right now for the world. It is an exciting time, particularly for the continent, an exciting time for the BRICS grouping. As the MEC did make us aware, we have the potential to combine the world's largest economic bloc right now with the world's largest free trade area. But in the words of the BRICS Business Council Chair, the South African chapter, Ms. Busi Mabuza, it's about the tangible ways in which we can do that to unlock the trade and investment opportunities that will benefit the respective economies involved, but more importantly, be for the betterment of the people that live in these economies. And so we're discussing this, and we're hoping that you'll be able to also give us your thoughts and your ideas as to how that can be done. And the same invite does go to the audience who are joining us virtually on Hopin. I've got my first panelist with me, joining me on stage, Mr. Saki Zamkaga. He is the Group CEO, Acting Group CEO of the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency. And we've also got our fellow friends who are joining us virtually. Hello to you all, but let me introduce you to the room. We have got Ms. Lerato Mataboge. She is the DDG for the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition here in South Africa. Afternoon, Lerato. We also have Mr. Yofi Grant, the CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. Good afternoon, sir. And also with him, Mr. Atumani Mkayandika, the Chief Investment Officer for the Tanzanian Investment Center. And good afternoon to you, sir, also. And so I'll just remind everyone to make sure that they are not on mute right now, because I'm actually coming to the virtual panelist first. Yofi, good to catch up with you, sir, but just your thoughts on this, because we're talking about BRICS and Africa, and just speaking maybe from the perspective of Ghana and maybe any other countries on the continent you would like to speak on behalf of, what does BRICS and Africa look like to you, sir?
Thank you very much. Definitely exciting, but excitement should mean that we have actually created the bridges and the linkages that will make it happen, which I'm afraid to say we haven't as yet done. I'm speaking that firstly as Ghanaian and what I've done in the past few months, but also as the Sub-Saharan Director for the African IPAs on the board of the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies. And let me just take a step back. In the past 3 months, I have been through Latin America. At least I went through Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, to try and create bridges of trade and investment between the African continent, of course, Ghana, and then those countries being the larger economies there. Subsequently, I've been to the Bahamas, I've been to Guyana, I've been to Barbados, and recently back from Trinidad and Tobago. And you obviously see the gap in information, the information asymmetry, but also the gap in connectivity between that side of the world and the African continent. Never mind that, there are a lot of people, there's a huge population of people of African descent on the Latin American continent and in the Caribbean. And so, I mean, it got so bad at a certain point, somebody actually told me after a presentation that we don't know you, we don't understand you. So it's difficult to build those bridges and the connectivity. So as we look at the opportunity, and yes, the opportunity is there without doubt. I mean, Africa has no less than 40% of the world's remaining mineral resources, not less than 60% of the remaining arable land left in the world. And so the potential to use that as a lever to increase our own economic gap is very important, notwithstanding that in terms of population size, we are the fastest growing population. Current population size is about 1.4 billion. likable to India and to China, who are just a side shade ahead. And the demography of our population is that 60% is less than 35 years old. That is itself is a commercial market, a consumer market just waiting to happen, but also potentially the greatest pool of human capital that the world can use to reset and grow again. But why is it not happening? And the rhetoric we're hearing today, we've heard it in the past, in at least more than 5 decades, 6 decades.
Sure.
But why hasn't it happened? And I think that one very important thing is policy. What policies are we as African countries ourselves doing? Sometimes you get the impression that in regulatory overhang, you have private sector that is in competition with governments, whereas governments should be facilitating the growth of private sector. So when you come to the African continent, less than 400 companies have a turnover of more than $1 billion a year. But when you look at those companies, quite a number of them are multinationals from outside the continent. And yet, here we are with the population, with the resources, and we haven't been able to convert those resources into real products for us to turn around.
Sure.
And so the AFCFTA creates the biggest opportunity for us to do so. But what is lacking? Investment. Investment.
Okay.
As we speak, intra-African investment is less than some 6%. And so for us as IPAs, our best bet is to go outside. Now, of course, for the rest of the world who see Africa, this is where the resources come from. The rest of the world hasn't yet caught up on the fact that Africa presents a very credible consumer market.
Okay.
And it's only recently, with the advent of the AFCFTA, that is coming out. And this was a factor that I have to keep harping in all those countries that I had been to. So as we speak, we have already engaged with the Caribbeans and trying to use Ghana as an entry point only because we've been there and we've sold this market, not just of Ghana, but of Africa. That you necessarily need Africa if you want to be a growing economy in the next decade.
Yofi, and I think that it's that point that I actually want to interject because it is an important point that you make. You do need Africa if you want to be anything meaningful in this world, particularly as we head into the next chapter. But perhaps let's also get some of the views from the rest of the colleagues who are joined in this conversation. And Atumani, maybe your brief thoughts, sir, as to, looking at the conversations that are happening right now about BRICS in Africa from a Tanzanian lens, what opportunities do you see to further accelerate those partnerships for mutual gain?
Let me introduce myself. My name is John Matthew Mnali. I'm the one who will be presenting on the Tanzanian Investment Center perspective on the issue of BRICS Business Council. Basically, from the way we see it, it is a very great opportunity to most of the African countries. And the Tanzania Investment Center is among the IPAs in Africa. I think we can take advantage of this BRICS Business Council. And we are fortunate that most of our countries have got these IPAs. Now, that being the case, I think let us get started. Let us start to work together so that we can take advantage of this. How can we work together? Then we can work together in a different way, but with the target of attracting and promoting trade and investment within the continent. I think through our IPAs, we can collaborate in organizing inward business missions, outward business missions from within Africa, but also from partner countries, partner states in the BRICS, because we understand that our partners in the BRICS, they are quite ahead of us. So we can take advantage of the level of development reached by our partners. Now, in collaboration with other countries in Africa, then through those inward business missions, outward business missions, organizing jointly international trade investment forums, exhibitions. Now, if our people will be able to interact, then they'll get a platform where they'll exchange ideas, but also they'll be able to establish various investment projects in our continent. The good thing with the IPAs, which have been established in most of our countries, is that most of the IPAs, they have got a facilitation role. Now we can take advantage of that facilitation role, which exists in our IPAs. So once we have such kind of missions, we have meetings that we'll be doing jointly, then through our IPAs, they'll be able to facilitate the investors from wherever they'll be coming from within the region, together with from our partners, to make sure that they establish their investment projects in Africa. And in so doing, I'm sure the level of trade and investment within the region itself will grow fast and fast. So let me stop here in order to give an opportunity to other colleagues who also want to contribute. Thank you.
All right. And perhaps let's hear from a current member right now who's already in the BRICS circle. And Lerato, just coming to you, because we have had such a huge expression of interest to either, expression of interest to be a part of the BRICS grouping. Some have actually taken it further by officially applying, right? So about 40 countries or plus that we're talking about. As South Africa, when you are seeing this huge interest, and particularly the interest from the continent to also want to join the BRICS party, as it were, what are some of the tangible ways you are thinking about implementing or accelerating some of those benefits that the BRICS and Africa partnership could realize?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fifi, and good afternoon to you and your viewers. Apologies, I can't join you. I'm at the site of the BRICS exhibition at the moment, so there's a lot of traffic, hustle and bustle. We're constructing, we are launching tomorrow morning at Gallagher Estates in Midrand. So that is the location now where everything is being set up. I mentioned this because this is one of the tangible ways that we are using to deal with the three issues we've been raising around the benefit that we can derive out of the BRICS, as Africa as a whole, South Africa included. One being that of trade. And in the trade conversation, it's always been around how do we diversify the products that we send to BRIC countries and make sure that it's not just minerals and agricultural commodities. So there's a function of getting manufactured products into the BRIC economies and dealing with market access there too. So one decision that we took is that with this summit, we're going to have what we call a BRIC Africa exhibition. So this exhibition we're launching tomorrow is showcasing South Africa's productive capability, a myriad of industrial products. And similarly, we have African countries also showcasing their products of choice to the delegates that will be here, so that when we have this conversation around trade and around market access, it's not just a theoretical conversation. These are the products that we are producing, and we want to sell them to Brazil, to Russia, to China, to India. So that's the one. And of course, on the investment side, that's a very important conversation to have. I appreciated what Ambassador the Dean was mentioning around, we need to build African capacity. And that capacity is around, infrastructure, industrial capacity, etc. To do so takes investment, right? Again, my colleague, Professor Grant on the other side mentioned intra-African investments being at less than 6%. So that means we need to accrue finances from all over the world for our development. So it doesn't mean the fact that we are integrating as Africans and we want African solutions for African challenges, that we don't leverage external partnerships. The BRIC economies, represent very affordable finance in many instances, as an example. So that's part of the conversation around when we want to, have FDI into the continent, how do we build relationships with the BRIC countries so we can also have that FDI come, but in a positive and a sustainable way. So it's not a zero-sum game, race to the bottom type. So it's important that we have that investment conversation. The third one that we are raising very distinctly is around the green economy and the technological divide, and how we make sure that leveraging those two new areas of growth, we do it in an inclusive manner. Our SMMEs are there, women businesses. So there's a lot of conversations to be had. And next week, starting tomorrow, in fact, are going to be very strategic for the African voice. African heads of states have been invited, ministers, business, as I said, also exhibitors. So we are going into the BRIC with the Africa voice, not just the South Africa voice. So for us, it's quite an important milestone in the evolution and the growth of the BRICS as a formation.
Okay. Thanks so much for that, Lerato. Saki, just coming to you, and maybe just if we just bring it home and just make it a little bit practical as to what these opportunities are, how we accelerate them, what the current bottlenecks are. I mean, as the GGDA, you work with a lot of companies, you try and create markets for them or access them to further markets where they can further grow in the areas in which they operate. You have data as to where South Africa has a comparative advantage right now, competitive advantage, in which sectors we can potentially double the value of earnings we're currently getting right now if certain things are tweaked to allow it. So from a GGDA perspective, and you are hearing this BRICS in Africa, you obviously will be mandated to ensure that it works from a Gauteng perspective. You're thinking around it.
No, thank you, Fifi. We participated and were very, very deliberate as a province that our participation in BRICS was through the TTIC and the BRICS Business Council. And that was because we thought the biggest opportunity of all of this is to give a platform to Gauteng-based businesses and by definition, South African-based businesses and others in the rest of the continent to export. So if there's anything we hope is going to be a legacy of this summit here is increased exports by South Africa and the African continent into the BRICS countries. I mean, if you look at just what the market means, you have more than 3 billion people in the BRICS countries combined. It was mentioned before, some of them now, I mean, their economies are worth trillions of dollars. So they have the capacity to buy, they have a demand, and we then created the platforms. Lerato spoke about the fact that at Galaga there's exhibitions. We invited businesses through the BRICS Business Council. I mean, we started on Monday where we had buyers from the different countries who were here saying, well, we're looking maybe at these products. There are 10 categories that we looked at as priority sectors where people could be. But of course, there are certain things that are very natural for the continent. We are resource heavy. A lot of tech products require certain commodities, which we have in SADC, as an example. Those that go into battery manufacturing, agriculture, we have an advantage into them. You talked about obstacles. What are those? It's logistics. But those obstacles themselves offer opportunities for construction, for energy, because if you must build a road, you need a constructor to do the road. And those are opportunities for either investments by some of the BRICS members, where countries may not have the money to pay for the infrastructure that's required. So really for us, it's very tangible. We're calling business people who have opportunities and say, come to us and let's see what we can do to enable.
Okay. So Yofi, we see you. I see that you'd like to emphasize something to us. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, just to emphasize that what the ambassador said before was very critical. That is capacity building. And we've also spoken about the IPs. Many of the IPs, unfortunately, do not have the capacity to engage. And that is one of the areas where we need our governments to understand that they are critical partners in the whole Africa development agenda. Secondly, 2 of the members of the BRICS are probably the largest economies in the world. And it's not like they don't know Africa. They know Africa. So I think it's about time we started forging new conversations based on those same relationships. And for example, when we are looking for FDI, and by the way, from the World Investment Report, FDI to Africa fell by 44%. When we're having these new conversations, we have conversations of productivity. How do we add value to our raw materials and resources for trade? And just not digging up, our gold, our diamonds, our oil, and sending it out there. And then thirdly, the most critical bit of it, which has come up since COP26, is Africa is resource rich. We have all the minerals required for energy transitions. How do we ensure that we engage in conversations where we now add value to our lithium, value to our coltan, value to our cobalt, value to our manganese and bauxite, instead of exporting it and having them there? The countries to which we are exporting these minerals are members of the BRICS. And so we need new conversations. Africa needs to be bolder, more aggressive, but we need to build capacity in here with policy. And that is why it's important we talk about policy, because our private sector has to be empowered to be able to engage. When our private sector is too small, it becomes the states to engage. And we know that the states most likely are not the best businesses, the best convenience of business. It's the private sector. And so how do we push our governments to work more with the private sector to do this engagement and build capacity on the continent?
All right, let's ask a government member right now then. Lerato, I'm going to come to you, but also because Yofi does mention an important point, just emphasizing what was mentioned by the ambassador earlier about the importance of value add. So we need to relook how the trade and the relationships are currently functioning, and in that relooking, we need to see how we can also get more for our resources. As the DTIC, how are you thinking about approaching such conversations, not only with the two largest, amongst the largest countries in the world right now that Yofi made reference to being China and India, who Africa already has relationships with, but possibly even other big heavyweights that are knocking on the door to join BRICS?
Certainly. The important dynamic, and it's not just that, it's always been there, but to really put practical impetus behind it, is the fact that now we really want to be deliberate about speaking as a continent. Because to speak to an India, for example, of 1.4 billion people, as South Africa of 60 million people, surely does not, it's better to speak as a continent of 1.4 billion people, which is the African continent. So we're quite deliberate as South Africa, and I know that Ghana is the same, is having that same posture to say, to really be taken seriously in the global economy, the African continent needs to come together and speak collectively around some of the challenges that we face, because those challenges are common. We all have fundamental infrastructure deficits, South Africa included. We've got load shedding, there's energy infrastructure challenges. So when we speak about addressing the African infrastructure deficit across the board, including, air transport, I think the ambassador spoke to how you need to fly to Europe to get to another country in the continent. Those are collective issues that we have as an African continent. Similarly, the industrial capability and capacity, the fact that we bemoan that we are exporting commodities still, it also speaks to our under-industrialization, right? So people can't buy what you don't produce, and that's just the point. So if you don't produce value-added products, there's no opportunity to buy them. So part of the conversation is adding value, and all of us have that collective challenge of making sure that we improve our industrial levels and capacity. So the time has come, and I agree with my colleague that we need to be bolder, right? And a bit more integrated in our message, because to compete with one another doesn't make sense. We've got common problems, and our fortunes are so intertwined that a growing continent benefits each and every individual African country. So we are using this BRICS summit as South Africa to be very decisive and deliberate about that posture that says, we come as a continent, we come as a powerful, strong, united continent, and we're coming to have, conversations with peers around trade and around investments, at least on the economic side. And then, of course, our colleagues who deal with other matters of politics and security would have similar conversations. So that is the approach and the posture we've taken, and we made sure that we then use, a platform like the exhibition, platform like the business forum that we're going to have, platforms like the inward buying missions, where we brought in buyers and investors from the BRIC countries to come and see our capabilities, are practical and tangible, and they speak to benefits for South Africa and the rest of Africa.
Okay. Yofi, I do see you there, but maybe let's also get the thoughts of our other colleagues. We'll come back to you, sir, in a short while, and we'll also be opening the room up.
Sorry, actually, I've taken it off.
All right, and we'll also be opening up the room to questions. I believe that there will be a mic that's roving around, so do let us know. You'll raise your hand if you do have any. So I want to come to you because, so obviously the pull factor, or one of the biggest pull factors right now, is the AFCFTA. So I want your thinking around, in terms of inviting the rest of the BRICS and the BRICS Plus into the continent. Does that need to come with certain incentives and all that to enhance or accelerate the trade, or does the size of the continent and the economic opportunity alone, will that be enough?
I think the incentives, and I was going to talk about that, Fifi, is probably what the continent, I think, is not paying a lot of attention to, because that's where you create the market. So let's use the US and Europe as examples. You look at Tesla. Tesla was not a profit-making company for a long time, but government created a lot of incentives because they were deliberate about the fact that they want energy transition. You look at Europe, even now, there's many European countries that will come to the continent, pay for feasibility studies to be done on energy projects for free. Why are they doing that? They are creating a market for their businesses. In the continent, not only do we not have the incentives, but we also don't control the IP behind a lot of these projects. So if you're not a battery manufacturer, however much you want to value add, you're value adding for who? Because it's the person who buys the products who's going to determine. Because if I'm a Chinese company or Indian company or an American or European company, why must I buy a product more expensive when I can buy it cheaper? So I think if we're not going to solve the control issues on who determines the market, how we incentivize businesses to be big enough. I mean, you look at China, they've done very well in having state-owned companies that are national champions, and they are now practically Fortune 500 companies. And those are the companies that then drive the demand. And I think here in the continent, until we support our businesses, and that's why in the province, our focus was that which are the businesses that have the capacity to export, but I think over and above that, we then need to support them. Because what the Africa Free Trade Area will do is that if you have logistics are not just for us to move amongst ourselves, it's also for competitors. It means they can now learn something at the port, get it to where it needs to be quicker and cheaper. So we can't get away out of developing our own sectors and being competitive where we need to be. So I think the governments have got to do a little bit more in creating incentives that are tangible for their own businesses. But on the other side, even the local business people themselves must come forward and say, this is what we require.
Sure. John, just your thoughts. A lot has been shared already by your respective panelists around the role of incentives, around the importance of governance, around policy and relooking relationships in accelerating this partnership between BRICS and the continent. I know you made reference to the support that you think would be beneficial for investment promotion agencies, inward missions, outward missions and the like, but just your thoughts on some of the things that have been shared thus far.
Of course, for the case of Tanzania, we have different investment framework that attracts investors into different sectors. So in terms of policy on our side, we have already improved to a great extent to make sure that whoever is interested to invest in any sector is well accommodated. And not only to accommodate, but also to sustain the investment, to continue investing and reinvesting. So in that case, it all depends on which area which area an investor is interested. Whether an investor is interested in mining, then we have a framework that will take care all investors who are interested into mining. But we have our priorities, and our priorities is to make sure that we would like to attract investments that will add value to the locally available raw materials. Now, this ranges from agriculture and agro-processing into mining and mineral processing, forestry and manufacturing of engineered wood products, livestock value chain, and so many other sectors. So most of these sectors that we have given priority are the sectors which the raw materials are widely available. And if they are well developed, then there is a very big linkage to the rural communities. Now, in that case, to a great extent, it will help even on our side to be able to alleviate poverty in the rural areas of Tanzania, because people will be linked to the major investments, and they will participate in producing various goods that will be able to find markets. So on our side, as I've said, we have different categories of packages of incentives given to the investors, depending on the size of investment and depending on the the sector that an investor is required, has shown interest. And we are in a position to accommodate different sizes of investors.
Sure.
So just in short, we can accommodate small-scale investors who will be able to come with capital not less than 500,000 US dollars if he's a foreigner. But to locals is a bit lower. It's about 50,000 US dollars. And then we have another category of strategic investors. Now, these are the big investors who can make big impact to the economy. They are referred as strategic investors. And then we have another one called the special strategic investor status. So all of these, in terms of incentive packages, are a little bit different from one category to the other. As an investment, as the project brings more investment, then the package of incentives is a little bit bigger, and an investor is given an opportunity to negotiate with the government if he needs more investment. So that window is available. Now, in that case, we'll be able to accommodate different levels of investors, whether from within Africa or from our partners, whether from Brazil, India, Russia, or China. We'll be in a position to accommodate all of them.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think that what we can agree on is that this relationship is a live document. It is not something that will be documented just overnight. It is a work in progress, but it's certainly a work that needs to happen, just given the big opportunities that it does have in store for all stakeholders involved. And the opportunities need to be realized on a mutual basis. It's not winner takes all, but it certainly does need to be a mutual partnership. But it's on that note that we do wrap up this live broadcast, one of many conversations that we will be hosting on CNBC Africa in the lead up to and as well as during the BRICS Summit next week. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you once again.